Hello and welcome back to another video. If you want to play retro consoles and you don't have a CRT television or want to stream or record gameplay, then you're definitely going to need some kind of scaler or a line doubler, line multiplier device so that you can enjoy your game on your high definition display. But it's also very important to get something that doesn't have horrible input latency and can handle 240p properly. 240p is the old video standard that a lot of old consoles have used in the past. And it's actually kind of tricky to find a cheap solution that will handle 240p. I currently have in my collection a RetroScaler 2X, which is the cheapest line doubler that I have so far. It's a RetroTink 2 knockoff. It does take component input, S-video and composite, and it worked great. I also have a RGBS control. That's a scaler, which can do a lot more. However, it's kind of annoying to use. And I also have an OSSC, which is towards the higher end of the spectrum. It's a line multiplier. But I still am always looking for something that's a good bang for the buck, cheap scaler. However, most of these types of scalers that are just, a plug and play, you just plug it into your console and then it outputs like 720p or 1080p video, they usually use a crappy scaler, just the crappy, cheapest off-the-shelf component that will be not designed for 240p and will just misinterpret 240p as 480i, so you'll have input latency and you'll have horrible blurry motion. But I've done a lot of research and I've found some videos on this device here that seems to me like this thing can actually handle 240p. Now, coverage on these devices is very sparse because most people who buy these things of Aliexpress don't care or don't know what 240p even is and how it should be handled. So they'll just get the cheapest, crappiest scaler and tell you that it's the best thing in the world. Now, I'm obviously not going to do that. If you remember, I had a video about an Aliexpress HDMI Famiclone, and I was wondering what kind of magic they're using in that device, where it can actually handle 240p properly, and it does a pretty good job at upscaling it to 720p. And it seems to be taking an RGB input. Now, there are some videos on this scaler on YouTube. I'll actually link some of them in the description that I used as a reference. And I think, judging by the videos, this is actually potentially using the same type of scaler that my Famiclone's using. So this is supposedly an actual 240p capable scaler. Now this is the only one I found. I don't know. Okay, so this one seemingly has multiple versions. You can get like a PlayStation version and maybe Nintendo, I'm not sure, and maybe Saturn as well. But it's only the Mega Drive version that I know for sure is using the correct scaler. There's also a PlayStation version which has RGB and component compatibility as well, but I wouldn't trust that because the image looks kind of weird on it and I'm not even sure if it properly handles 240p. This I know for sure will. So this is the for MD1, MD2 SNK RGBS upscaler. So this is only RGBS, whereas the PlayStation version can also do component, which tells me it's a different chip. So this is mainly just like an RGB upscaler, and that's pretty cool because RGB upscalers are kind of hard to find. Like I said, the RetroTink clone, the RetroScaler 2X, for example, can only do component. So let's take a look at it. It says video converter. It says 1080p. I don't think it's 1080p. It's probably 720p. But usually these devices always tell you that it's 1080p and then just ends up being 720p. And unfortunately the sticker is covering up the most important information, but you can see here, support input resolution 240p, 288p, 480p, 480i, I'm guessing 576p and 576i. Now, this is for Mega Drive and Neo Geo. I don't have either of those currently, but I still decided to get one of these. Now, how am I going to use this? I'm just going to potentially chop this cable off, this end of it, and then just put a SCART lead on it. But it also came with some adapters, so maybe I can... These actually feel pretty good, pretty hefty. So it comes with a Mega Drive 1 adapter and a Mega Drive, an SNK adapter as well. So you can hook it up to a Neo Geo. And here's the DIN plug. I need to check if these have stereo audio, but honestly I don't care too much because I'm bypassing audio anyways on my GBS control, so maybe I'll just hook up the RGB and that's it. So it's just going to be a video scaler for me. So what you can do is you can just chop this end off and then put a SCART connector on it and then hook it up to your switch or whatever. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be hooking it up to a SCART switch, and then I can try this out with a PlayStation 1. That would be the main interest of mine for this device. Maybe PS2 as well. So yeah, it looks like there's a switch here with which you can switch it between SNK and MD. I'm just gonna put it on MD. What it does is it just kind of changes the shape of the image. It does some sort of analog image adjustment because the Neo Geo outputs a differently shaped image, or like something about the output I remember being wonky and weird. So you have to use that for SNK. Obviously, I'm just gonna leave it on Mega Drive. It should work fine. And then yeah, 16:9 or 4:3, it doesn't really matter. Because I just do the scaling myself on my TV or the capture card in OBS. So yeah, that's all we get. So we get the scaler itself, we get the two adapters, so one for MD1 and one for SNK Neo Geo. Now neither of these actually have a stereo output, so Mega Drive 1 and SNK, I believe they're both just mono audio. This is probably stereo if you're using it with the Mega Drive 2. So if you want audio as well, then this is probably where you have to chop it off. But I'll probably just I'll sacrifice maybe the SNK cable, and then we'll turn it into something else. And then here we get a micro USB cable for power. Not sure if you need that. Sometimes these get enough power off just HDMI, but there it is. And then we also get an HDMI cable, which is like about 1.8 meters probably. So yeah, gonna get to work, and then yeah, I'll make an adapter for this thing, and I can test it out with a PlayStation and see if it does support 240p. One thing I forgot to mention is one of the interesting things I want to know if this thing can support resolution switches, because that'd be pretty big. I mean, okay, so I forgot to mention this thing costs like $30, I believe, right now. So for $30 you get an RGB scaler? That's pretty good, isn't it? So yeah, I'm gonna hook up a SCART lead to it, and then we'll check out 240p and see if it can do 240p to 480i resolution switching. Alright, now for the good news. As you can see, it works. 240p is actually being handled as 240p and not 480i, so there's no unnecessary deinterlacing or any artifacting. From that, input latency seems fine. Scaling is actually pretty sharp. Output is 1080p Full HD, so the box wasn't lying. I ended up sacrificing the Mega Drive 1 adapter cable, so I just chopped off the Mega Drive 1 connector, and on it I've hooked up the SCART connector. Here's the color coding I had to manually figure out by just checking continuity on every single pin. Weirdly enough, both left and right audio channels were actually hooked up to the same pin because the Mega Drive 1 output is just mono. And now for the bad news, but before I get to it, if you're sensitive to flashing lights, then you probably want to look away because it's gonna get ugly. So at first I thought I hooked up the SCART connector wrong or something along those lines, because the image was absolutely just messed up when I turned on my PlayStation, and so just see for yourself. But then quickly the console switched to the game's 240p resolution, which displayed correctly, so that told me that my wiring was fine. I did also try a Dreamcast, and a PlayStation 2, but the results were similar. So it seems like despite what the box is claiming, this does not actually support 480i, which is actually a huge bummer if you're trying to use PlayStation especially. But it won't even properly display games like Sonic 2's Versus mode, so I'm not sure what they were going for here. Not only is it false advertising, but it isn't actually 100% compatible with every Mega Drive game to begin with. So it's really disappointing that the scaler can only be used with 240p devices, but that's not the only thing that's wrong with this. Now let me explain my testing scenario here. So I've used my PlayStation 1 and also my PlayStation 2, which are both PAL consoles. However, there's a difference in the way they display NTSC. While the PAL PlayStation 1s are unable to display the full 59.94 Hz refresh rate that the NTSC counterparts can, they're only running at around 59.27 Hz. Now why am I saying this? Unfortunately, this device is outputting 59.94 Hz to retain compatibility with all TVs. The side effect of this is that most retro consoles don't actually output the full 59.94 Hz. So in the case of this scaler, what happens is it actually introduces duplicate frames, which result in jerky motion, mostly noticeable in 2D side-scrolling games. But I even noticed it during 30 FPS 3D games. While it's not too bad with the PlayStation 2, my PAL PlayStation 1 looks very jarring. Maybe you can see it better on this example. So here I've loaded up the 240p test suit on my PlayStation 2. As you can see, it looks okay. However, every couple seconds there's a bit of a stutter, a bit of a jerky motion. That's the duplicate frames being introduced to sync up the console's refresh rate with the scalers. However, when we switch over to the PlayStation 1, which is outputting around 59.27 Hz, the jerkiness is just almost unbearable on the scrolling test here. It seems to have this duplicate frame every 2 seconds. The Mega Drive / Genesis is also not outputting a full 59.94 Hz. I believe it's somewhere around 59.92 Hz, so you'd probably still see some jerkiness in Mega Drive games as well. So you can basically say goodbye to smooth scrolling. Other than that, 240p, it seems to be handled properly. You can see the drop shadow test is being passed with flying colors, which is great, but there's just too many problems with the scaler. All of these issues are a massive deal breaker even at $30. I like that this is a unique scaler. It doesn't seem to be knocking off anything else like the RAT2X or the whatever else scalers that are available in the retro community. This is their own take on the formula. However, it kind of shows because there's a huge lack of attention to details. I mean, these are things they should have been able to notice during testing, but maybe just didn't care or didn't feel like putting any more extra money into the device to improve it. So it just ends up being disappointing. So final conclusion, what do I think of this thing? Honestly, I'm very disappointed. Even for $30, this is just not worth it. You can tell that not a lot of thought and not a lot of love went into making this product. Or maybe just the standards weren't really high enough for testing and just, figuring out the ins and outs. I mean, not only does it have false advertising claiming that it supports 480i, but even 480p, I mean, that's just ridiculous. But the annoying frame pacing issues and, the trying to sync up the refresh rates, it's just not a good product. I mean, I was hoping that they could finally create something good out of their own head, but it's just, again, it just falls short with so many issues, so many shortcomings. It's just a deal breaker. Even for $30, I can't recommend it. There are better options out there for that much, or maybe a little bit more. I think personally, RetroTink 2X plus this card to YPBPR transcoder is probably a good way to go, or retroscaler 2x, or maybe a RAD 2x if you just want it for one console. But honestly, yeah, this thing is no good. And I'm really disappointed because I was hoping for this to be really cool. It does have really good image quality in 240p, and I mean, you know, it outputs 1080p, which does look pretty sharp, but just no, it's no bueno. So yeah, kind of sucks that we had to end it on a low note, but this is how it goes sometimes. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed the video, and see you soon in the next one. Thanks for watching, and take care.